Welcome to High Heels and Hidden Truths. I'm Vanessa Murphy, investigative reporter at KLAS TV in Las Vegas. Today we have Pam Weckerly here with us. Assistant District Attorney for Clark County, now heading the criminal division. I'm so happy you're here. I've been reporting here since 2013. I don't think I've ever interviewed you, which boggles my mind.
Well, first, thanks for having me. I don't think I have interviewed with you either,
Right.
and I have been here at the DA's office quite a bit of time. So
Yeah.
it's nice to be here.
Thanks. I'm really glad. So first of all, I noticed that you essentially worked your way up at this office, correct? Can you talk somewhat about your background?
Sure. I came to Las Vegas after I graduated from law school. I was a federal law clerk, and then I came over to the DA's office and worked as a law clerk there. From there, I went to general litigation. After that, I worked for the Special Victims Unit, and then immediately preceding my position now, I worked in homicide. First as one of the regular prosecutors, then as an assistant team chief, and then I was the team chief of homicide, guns and gangs, and then I was promoted to ADA.
Wow. And so as the head of the criminal division now, how has your role changed?
So for the 20 years preceding being the assistant district attorney, I was in a courtroom pretty much every day. I prosecuted dozens of homicide cases, and so I was in court all the time. I've kept a little bit of a caseload now in my position, but primarily I'm managing other attorneys and overseeing our prosecutions.
How many attorneys, approximately?
So in the criminal division, there's around 100. Myself and my co-ADA, Alex Chen, we manage the criminal division. And we split it up, but a lot of times there's overlap, just sort of who's there ready to handle what issue.
Wow. It's amazing you said 100 because it's like I know the same people.
Yes.
Like the cases I cover are usually the same prosecutors who I've
Right.
gotten to know, right?
Yes.
What do you like about the job?
My very favorite thing about the DA's office is the people I work with, but there's also a lot of job satisfaction in that we're serving the community. I like the partnership we have with the law enforcement agencies and that sense of working collaboratively. And I also like the idea that we're delivering some form of justice to victims of crime.
What don't you like about the job?
So sometimes the hardest thing about the job is the kind of incremental way cases move through the criminal justice system, and mostly that's due to just court time and just sort of limitations on resources. So sometimes that's frustrating, the way it's just kind of slow, the progress. That's sometimes frustrating. I think that's a real challenge for victims' families as they're kind of awaiting resolution on cases.
For sure.
Yeah.
We hear from families who are in that wait.
Exactly.
What changes have you made as you've taken on this newer position, or what changes do you want to make?
So initially, when I came into the position of assistant district attorney, we actually kind of modernized our case management system. We went from people that carried files to court to now everything's electronic. There's certain challenges associated with that as well. The other thing that kind of just occurred with our population of attorneys is we have many young attorneys, and they are really great, and they have so much potential. So one of the things I've kind of worked on, because my experience is almost all trial experience, is trying to encourage them to get into court more and to go to trial more and have more courtroom time than maybe they would have had time in previous years, I guess, in the office.
Being a trial attorney is no joke. stressful. You have the nightly deadlines. What do you think makes you a good trial attorney? Because I saw you during Robert Tellis.
Yes. I think what makes me a good trial attorney is I am a pretty hard worker, and I try not to leave anything to chance. I try to imagine what the next day's court session is going to be. What are the arguments that the defense is going to bring up? What am I trying to accomplish with each witness? And I guess I aim to leave nothing to chance. Obviously, that trial that does happen, but you're able to adapt so much more easily if you've got your game plan in place for each day of court.
Wow. Okay, let's take a quick break. Welcome back. I'm Vanessa Murphy here with Pam Weckerly, Clark County District Attorney's Office, now Assistant District Attorney, heading the criminal division. So let's get to some trickier issues.
Sure.
You know that one sort of hot button issue in the community is the issue of bail.
Yep.
And oftentimes we see lower amounts where people can get out of custody. A member of the general public might see someone accused of a very serious crime, maybe involving death, maybe involving a sexual assault, not in custody. What do you want to say about that? Because I know it's a tricky issue on all sides here.
Yeah, for sure. It is a tricky issue. The way the law currently is, the only defendants that can be held no bail are defendants facing first-degree murder charges, where the proof is evident and the presumption is great of guilt. Short of that, everyone is usually entitled to a bail setting. In terms of how I approach bail and how I train our deputies to approach bail is, first, we have to consider the safety of the community and our witnesses, honestly, in some cases. And the secondary approach to bail, obviously important to the court, is that the person returns for any court proceedings. Now, when I was in homicide, we would get really high bails all the time because of the nature of the charges. I certainly agree with the concept that there are many people that will return to court without even a high bail setting, that they would be responsible enough. And I think the challenge is there are so many cases, it's just kind of identifying who we can be assured will return versus, in some domestic violence situations or some other kinds of crimes where the situation is so volatile. We have deep concerns about the safety of our witnesses and the community if the person were let out. And so what we do is we just make our best assessment, and obviously it's up to the court all the time. And we make our argument and live with what the court decides.
I watch the grand jury readings. I try to watch every time, but and oftentimes, a prosecutor might say, we want bail for this reason, and the process. And for our viewers, there's this argument about bail, and the prosecutor says, here's why I think we should have this. Usually the defense attorneys are not at those grand jury readings. But either way, sometimes I wonder, is the prosecutor giving a higher number just so they know the judge might not give that number, but closer to it? Is it ever?
So that's a good question. I would say there's probably some variation amongst deputies. When I did it, I always tried to ask for the number I really wanted because I felt like, look, I'm appearing in front of this judge all the time, and I want them to know I am being consistent, right? Like if I think a lower bail's okay, I'll ask for that. If I'm really concerned about this particular defendant, I'll ask for the no bail.
But do you think there is a difference between how this is handled now versus 10 years ago?
I do think the judges are more sensitive to issues with bail reform, and I think that defendants are more likely to receive a lower bail. That's not necessarily wrong in every case. Certainly we disagree with some bail settings, but there has been, I think, a movement to allow people release on bail. And in some ways that's good, right? If there's an individual that's likely to receive probation, we want we don't want them to lose their housing. We don't want them to lose their job. And so there are important considerations where someone who should be entitled to bail should get out and be able to make their court appearances, but also stay involved in their own life. So it's not, one arrest isn't like a devastating event.
Right. Yeah. It's tricky because especially I cover a lot of sex crimes.
Yeah.
And I think about if someone is accused of these crimes, obviously they can't be punished because they're not convicted yet. But then I think about, well, what if a child reported this person, and how does that kid feel knowing I spoke up, I had the courage, and then boom, this person's walking around? But it's such a complex issue. It's not easy for really anyone. Another one, plea deals.
So with regard to children, the first question, I think for the DA's office, we have to consider where is the accused living in relation to the child. Is the caregiver to the child sympathetic to the accused? We have to be very concerned with those dynamics in terms of asking for a bail setting and where the individual might live if they make bail. Now, plea deals, shifting gears, that is a necessary part of the criminal justice system. I mean, it would grind to a halt if every case proceeded all the way to trial. I don't think it would be good for our side or the defense side. Everyone needs a certain amount of negotiation in the cases. I think for victims, it's hard for families to sometimes hear a case is going to be negotiated. We're always weighing what would be justice in this case? What's the state of our evidence? What would a jury maybe do? And we're trying to put all those factors together to make a fair offer of resolution in most cases. I think we get there in most cases. There are some cases, of course, and cases that I've had over the years that we've just said there is no plea offer. This case, you'll either plead to all the charges or you'll go to trial. And I've had both outcomes where they have pled to all the charges without a trial, and then, of course, ones that just went to trial.
I know that one of the cases that people really, it strikes a nerve is Henry Ruggs, but what we have tried to express is perhaps there was some concern about guaranteeing a conviction in that case due to the investigation. So we try to find out as much as we can and report that, but people don't always want to go on the record with certain factors.
Sure.
We have reported that already now, but I know it's tricky. And you don't have an easy job.
It's a good job. It's a fulfilling job, but you're correct. It's not always easy.
Let's take a break. Welcome back. I'm Vanessa Murphy with Pam Weckerly, who heads the criminal division at the Clark County District Attorney's Office. You are in the thick of it. Is there anything that surprises you about maybe trends or something you are seeing as far as crime lately?
One of the things that I have seen that concerns me is the number of youthful offenders that have access to guns.
Oh, wow.
And I haven't done a numerical analysis, but just from my own kind of anecdotal experience, I feel like there are younger defendants that are in possession of weapons, and it's such a volatile situation when a gun is introduced in any kind of conflict or any situation that the outcome is likely to be far worse than anybody intended. And then also for those people that get charged, that means your sentence is higher too. So I would say that's a trend that that I'm just very concerned about.
Do you think it's more like, and I know you don't have the numbers on you right now, and it's probably tricky but do you think it's they're finding guns like in their household, or they're like buying them? Like where are they coming from? I guess is my question.
I don't know. I think that's a good question. I think they're probably not all like in the household, but there's maybe access through friends, or it's just such a complex problem. But they do seem to be getting access to them, and at younger ages, like 14 and 15, and that is a trend that I think everyone wants to get away from for sure.
As a parent myself and watching sort of what unfolds in our community, I think I'm sort of like on high alert of what can I do right so my kid is safe and law abiding. And I think you're a parent.
I am.
And what would you say to parents?
Well, I think all of us are just trying to do the best we can, right, as parents. And so I certainly would not say I have all the answers. But I would say in my job, I have definitely age appropriate, depending on where they were. I would talk to them about, substances. You don't know what you're taking. If you have anything from a friend or a stranger, you have no idea. So that's like incredibly dangerous activity. And even now my kids are in their 20s, and every time they leave the house, I'm saying, don't drink and drive. And, just these kind of constant reminders, which they roll their eyes at, but I feel like the message is maybe getting through. But I think for all of us, right, is that we just want to have some sense that we have a relationship with them, and if they were facing something very serious, they would come to us. And I think every parent wants that. So
like open communication and a continuous dialogue. I'm glad you brought up substances, because I covered one of your office's cases recently about some visitors allegedly buying cocaine in a casino, and it turns out it was fentanyl. And I've seen this, right? We've all seen this for years now here. Do you think this is just getting worse and worse?
It sure seems like it. We hear of it more and more. And, certainly you shouldn't be doing drugs, but it is heartbreaking that someone who is just making, one mistake, it costs them their life. And I'm sure like most of these people are young and have everything in front of them, and it's just terrible. It is the worst feeling to learn that some young person took a chance that people do all the time, and is not like, I don't know, the violent, but then it ends up costing them everything.
Yeah, I mean, I would advise anyone to not touch any type of drug. It's just not.
Absolutely.
Right? And I feel like when I was in college, I'm not saying it's right, but people were obviously experimenting with different things. But we had never heard of fentanyl. This was not happening that we knew of. And now it's just a totally different level. The other thing you mentioned, drunk driving. Our roads, in my opinion, are frightening, especially if you're driving around with kids in the car. What do you think your office is doing differently? Because that is one thing where people sometimes do see plea deals with a deadly drunk driving case, and it's upsetting. What do you want to say?
So our vehicular crimes team, I think, does a really good job of prosecuting those cases and prosecuting them kind of consistently, regardless of who the defendant is. There are variations that sometimes come into play based on if there were issues with a search, if there was a timing issue as to when blood was drawn, and certain issues of admissibility. That affects how we maybe would negotiate those cases. But for the most part, if the case is intact, they are proceeding the same in every single case, and I think they're doing a good job. I do agree with you. You know, any kind of tragedy that comes from that is one too many for sure. Or even like road rage cases, like those are just terrible. I do tell my kids, if someone cuts you off, let it go.
Right.
You know, this is not something you want to have a confrontation over. But yeah, like some of those things that happen, I think all of us can kind of picture possibly being a victim of that type of crime. And it's really scary because there's no way you can kind of modify your behavior to avoid that risk.
Wow. Okay, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Welcome back. I'm Vanessa Murphy here with Pam Weckerly, who heads the criminal division at the Clark County District Attorney's Office. I'm speaking fast because there's so much I want to fit into this show. There's so much I want to talk to you about. You have a really big case unfolding in your office right now. Dwayne Davis, Keefe D, accused of taking part in a conspiracy, essentially, which resulted in the murder of Tupac Shakur. Anything you want to say about this case?
Well, I for the office, I think it's an important case, but obviously there'll be eyes on it nationwide, not just in Las Vegas. So it's important in that regard too. The other thing I would say is it's gone on a long time. I mean, the crime was so long ago. So we're hopeful to get a positive resolution to that case now that we're kind of ready to go to trial and we have a trial date in August.
It's tricky because we know that his argument is going to be, well, I was just saying I did that to sell a book.
Yep. Yes.
So a lot of eyes on that one. Another case, and I know you can't really say a lot. I don't want to put you on the spot, but another case that has really received a lot of attention has to do with a private school here in Las Vegas where some 8th graders are accused of sexually assaulting another boy on a class trip in Costa Rica.
Right.
We know that 2 of the boys are now charged as adults in connection with video that prosecutors in your office said they found. The other 2 boys are not charged at this point at all. We've reported it's because police say they had no video on their devices and the jurisdiction. Is there anything you want to say about that? Because this is one that's received a lot of attention.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's frustrating and it's hard to understand how only half the people that were involved have been charged. We are limited as state actors to our jurisdiction, which is the state of Nevada, and that is a big impediment in terms of how we can charge in that particular case and the evidence that existed at the time that's linked to Nevada.
In your career so far, what would you say is the most memorable case for you?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm dating myself. My first kind of major case was the Jane Cordova Doe case, which was a little girl who was murdered, and she was her body was put into a trash dumpster, and that was years ago. More recently, I prosecuted Robert Tellis. Thomas Randolph was a big case. I also prosecuted another case where an 11-year-old girl was shot as she was doing her homework, and that family, I think of them all the time because I just think of how much they've gone through. So I've had a lot of cases. Some were higher profile and some not as much, but I feel like I have a real memory of most of my victims' families because if you're going to trial on a murder, you're spending a lot of time with the survivors. And, it's been my honor to work with them, but I'll think about them, I'm sure, the rest of my life.
And that work can take its toll.
It does take its toll. I think you feel like you've done something important and you're not fixing anything and the loss will reverberate for the rest of their lives too. But the idea that you can just give them some sense that someone took notice and there was some form of justice is like a little thing you can do for them, and that's been gratifying for me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Promise me you'll come in again.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Great conversation. Thanks for
you.
watching.